Hello and welcome. My guest today has been involved with education globally for decades. Currently, she's the Chief Operating Officer for AACSB, which is an agency that accredits universities in Asia. She believes that today it is very important to bring education at par globally. Welcome, Dr. Peacock.
Thank you.
You believe that it's very important to have standardization in education, and especially the higher education. And that's what you do. You go and check out universities around the world and try and bring them at par. How important is it to have this standardization globally today? Because isn't it actually important to have creativity and have variety in education rather than standardization?
Yeah, absolutely. While we have standards, the way we approach it is that we make a school or within a university to define its mission. Okay, so it's the mission which differentiates the organization, and it's within that framework then that they have to demonstrate they meet their mission, but within our standards. So although that might seem difficult, it actually works.
So it's standardization, but not taking away what is very special to their region or their
absolutely.
mission.
Yes, we do not have a prescriptive approach to accreditation. We don't tell schools what to do. We say within our standards, and I just said this, but within our standards, you define your mission, you tell your story, and then we match the two. Okay, yeah. For example, a school could define itself to be local as opposed to international. So we would look at its student profile, what it teaches, the research the faculty do, and we would expect to see that was local in nature. Okay, you can still meet our standards. Our standards look at quality of faculty, quality of teaching, and so on. So within that mission, they can still meet our standards.
How is it that you would standardize and allow deviations at the same time? And let me take the example of India, China, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, all the countries that you're looking at. All these countries have very different ways and different cultures. So how do you actually bring all that into one standard fix and then look at Europe, America, Brazil, and the rest of Africa and try and say, okay, we will bring a global standard into education that will fit everyone and benchmark everyone. Is that really possible?
Well, I think that we have that status of a very well-established, we're nearly 100 years old, we've been doing this a long time. The fact that we've got that reputation, I think that if we accredit a school in Indonesia or one in the Philippines or something, there is no doubt that raises the level of education, for that student going to that institution. If they come out with a degree from there and then they can go to other schools, say to do graduate education if they were doing undergraduate. I mean, there's certain things that go along with that give that student a better opportunity to move forward. So I think it's our brand, our recognition. I understand your question was more about standards being standards, and you're trying to not suggest but talk about standards being rigid, and does the system suffer because of that rigidity? And I absolutely don't think it does. I mean, we've managed to accredit our schools I think we're in 41 countries with accredited schools. So we have managed to fit our model into those different situations. And that is not easy. We know that, for example, if you go into the Philippines, the way faculty are hired is very different than the way faculty are hired in, say, the United States. The compensation is completely different, such that in the Philippines they would have to supplement their income in a different way if all they were academics. So we adapt a model to accredit a school when the actual people teaching are employed in a different way than they would be in, say, England or in, say, the United States or something. So we can fit our standards into these different economies. And of course the emerging economies are certainly a challenge, and I mean India is a challenge.
What are your plans for India?
What are my plans? My plans, our plans. I don't think they're any different than most countries. We go in with our set of standards. I go in and inform. I do recognize differences, and I will, because I'm in Asia and I'm the link between Asia and headquarters, I will do that connection. So if the group that are looking at the detail, I will try to inform to say, well, you have to understand that in India, for example, AICTE would say there is a student to faculty ratio, which is really actually remarkably low, much lower than some countries. So in fact, that's great for students, okay? But what it does is it means the schools have to spend more money because they have to employ more faculty. So you have to recognize these little differences because they create differences as they move through the standards. So, I mean, my job is to understand the different countries and try to translate how they can approach the standards and how we do adapt. We absolutely adapt. We don't let a school in that doesn't meet the standards, but the standards are flexible enough to allow for different models. So that's how we do it, really. So.
But India already has standards set out. You're trying to bring in international standards which will perhaps integrate the Indian education system more and with the global community and have recognition overseas. Is that what you're looking at? Trying to benchmark the already existing standards in India by supplementing it with your standardization?
You have an approval process, you have an accreditation process, but it's not used by many, right? It's not that popular. But you have an approval process, and we have something of the order of 3,000 approved business programs. Okay, now I don't totally understand that approval process or what allows a school to operate, but certainly we would not accredit 3,000 schools because I'm sure they're not to the standards that we would accredit. Okay, so I think we are not trying to change your approval process or anything like that. I think that we come in and we set, our standards are fairly well known, and I think schools can meet it, but they have to get very focused and work on it.
That's why no one covers India quite like we do. Sri Lankan Airlines. You're our world.
Surya, New Delhi.
Kuwait Airways, wings of comfort, day and night. A beautiful experience, lip-smacking meals, exotic destinations, a world of comfort. Kuwait Airways, let's fly together.
Having worked in many countries, you've probably come across Indians who use the education system beyond the borders of India. So Indians studying in Singapore, in Australia, across the world, in fact, England and America, of course. You probably find that they have, in many cases, excelled in those systems.
Absolutely, yes.
So what is the lesson that you think exists in that particular experience?
Well, I mean, the basic education here, if people have the opportunity to take, to use it, to get part of it, the basic education here is very good because there is structure and they can leave here having been very well educated. They speak English, which is a big advantage. They're very technically strong. They're good at math. They're good at analytical stuff. And so they leave here and can do very well because I think they've been brought up in a fairly, I don't want to use controlled or rigid, but certainly structured education. And so they, going into these other countries, Britain, US, and Australia, they can deal with what they have to deal with in doing PhD programs and so on, and so they get educated there, and they adapt very well. What do we learn from that? Well, maybe it's not what we learn from that, but maybe the Indian schools have to learn from that. And in fact, if those people stayed here and did their further education here, I think that this system would benefit a lot from that. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? I mean, I think there's massive amount of capability. I mean, they do well. We know that a lot of the major business schools are headed by Indians. We know that. So I think India has to say, hey, how does that happen? And we could do that. And then we could have major business schools and environments that will then be as famous as Kellogg and Wharton and INSEAD and so on.
But don't you think education itself is going through a bit of a revolution today around the world? There's a lot of talk about innovation and creativity.
Creativity, yeah.
And everybody seems to be emphasizing creativity.
Yeah.
Do you think we are teaching creativity? Because that's a difficult one to teach.
The debate is, can you teach creativity?
And then we go back to what Mark Twain said: "I never let my schooling get in the way."
Of my
education.
Well, I mean, of course, we have the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs. I mean, they all did extremely well with very little. So, I think that I think you can give students stories of creativity, and you can certainly put them in environments that make them brainstorm, that make them, quote, be creative, and you can run competitions, and many schools do that. But creative genius, I don't know how much. I mean, and there's only going to be a few who actually become famous for it. But I don't know if business schools can teach it. They can certainly give stories and create environments. I mean, there's a new book just came out, Rethinking the MBA, from Harvard. And Shrikant Datta, of course, an Indian, was one of the authors. And I think that they recognize that the skill set for MBAs has to change, and they're doing that. What are the three terms? Knowing, doing, and being. And they keep emphasizing the being. I don't know if this is the latest fad. But certainly knowing has always happened. Doing, to be honest, doing has happened a lot. So, but in general, I think the knowing's always been going on. The doing, I think, has been going on in many cases. The being is this new thing. This thing about more like attitude, and it's all along the sustainability, continuum, and it's a little bit I don't know. Is it quote sustainable? I mean, I know that's another issue, sustainability, which is all in that part. But I wonder how long this three-pronged approach will actually go on. I don't know.
An interesting area that people are now looking at very carefully is the knowledge domain. And there's a lot of talk around that. Of course, again, it needs to be understood in more detail as to what we mean by the knowledge domain. It's huge.
Yes.
But there seems to be a move to try and harness and perhaps even control to a certain extent the knowledge domain. Do you think that's really possible in the first place? Because everybody seems to be trying it, and it's not something new. It's been happening for decades. Well, you try and control the flow of information, or you try and control the type of information. Do you see this happen globally?
I don't see how it's possible. There's a train running, and I'm not sure it's easy to stop. Because I think we have the capability to keep digging. So how can you stop people doing that? I'm not so sure you can.
Do you think the internet has in many ways brought education to the door for the average person? So it's not necessarily a formal degree that he needs, but he has the tools through the internet.
Absolutely, and absolutely. But obviously you need, and I think libraries are doing this. I mean, you have to learn what information is useful and what is not. I mean, if you have a task to do, it's extremely easy to get diverted on the internet. I mean, we all know that. I mean, we might go in one direction, but then how many hits do you see? 1 million hits when you put a few words in.
Well, that's where organizations like yours...
Yeah, well, you need good search engines,
Well, that's there, but organizations like yours could actually certify online courses as well. And that's an area that... don't you think that's something in the future that would perhaps happen? Where you have international certified courses for online education?
Well, we do. No, we don't. We, of course, include online education. But we actually, we have a standard actually that talks about faculty-student interaction. So...
But does that have to be physical interaction, or can it be on the internet?
Absolutely not, no. No, of course not.
It could be virtual interaction.
but I think it has to be meaningful interaction. So you have to, the school has to demonstrate that if they have a live face-to-face course and students do, you know, that's maybe one course they do. They may do a blended, and then they may do a totally online. Now, in different areas, you will find different success rates. I mean, you've got your outcomes and you have your measures of success. I think there's no, I mean, there's been research, but I don't think there's any definitive answer to that, because I think it's very dependent on the population. Because I think that some students thrive on face-to-face, some would never even be educated if they had face-to-face. So the online opportunity is there to give them a different, a different platform, a different opportunity. So I don't think we can, we shouldn't judge necessarily. We should allow all of them to happen. But if we have standards, then hopefully our standards can get to a level playing field, and that we get the elements of good education in all different modes of delivery. I don't think it's that easy. We still have relatively very, very few online courses. I mean, relatively speaking.
Don't you think that would be a great opportunity for India, where the internet penetration is growing, and the opportunities would be there for sending out the message online?
I mean, obviously you've got to have access, and you've got to have broadband or enough band width, or I'm not technical in all of that, but there's no doubt that somebody very remote in a rural area, if they can get access to a screen and a feed,
they could probably do a degree from Singapore.
Absolutely, yes. Actually, I gave a talk not long ago about somebody asked me to talk about India as an educational hub, and I think that I think it has a lot of challenges before it could be successful. I think mainly because, first of all, there's a massive amount of competition. There's some very strong educational hubs in the region, if you think of the region. One, of course, being Singapore, Malaysia. We've got Sri Lanka pouring massive amount of money into education. Of course, Vietnam's been strong and growing, quite aggressive. So you've got a lot going on. And I think to start to attract students from outside, I think you have to demonstrate a strong infrastructure. You've got to accommodate, it's not just the education, it's the whole environment. And I think, and that word infrastructure tells it all. So travel, accommodations, well-being, support structures.
So where does India's strength lie?
Innovation, probably, I would think, because they are known for being able to actually ideas. And I mean, if you look at Bangalore and all the startups and they bring talent in, put talent together, small groups, and come up with great things. They can adapt things, and the little tiny Tata car and so on. But the issue is getting it to market, getting the message out, and then again this whole infrastructure. Because if you look at the globalization index material, India still has not got along. It's still, I think it's ranked in the maybe 50 or so, which is not that low. But if you think about the countries on top, I think that they have a lot to do, and it's basic basic needs, basic necessities, and infrastructure. Same word again, you know. So huge potential, but it needs to work at it. But it could, I think, certainly there is the talent here, no doubt. There's basic education is good, solid, and I think that if you know it's focus and getting the processes set so that you can move along towards improving, and I think that's what's needed, really.
How do you see your contribution to the Indian education system and the market in the future?
I think we want India to, the institutions, I think we want them to grow in quality. We're not trying to mould them in any way. We still want the characteristics to be of Indian characteristics. We don't want you to become an America, you know, or England or Australia. I think that the uniqueness has to stay. I think it's the issues is there consistent quality? So will a student coming in, will the processes work? Will they graduate? You know, will everything work such that when they go to class, the right things happen? Eventually, they get their grades. I just think it's looking more at getting it together than with setting some quality levels across the board. But I think all the elements are there. I mean, certainly you can get extremely strong faculty with good analytical skills, develop theory, innovation is there, thinking, the Indian thinking and the philosophers and so on is wonderful, I think. So you get that sort of more liberal arts background, which I think adds a lot of value.
We wish you luck.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your views with us.
Okay, good.
And we see you next week. Until then, goodbye.
This program is brought to you by Air Astana.